I don't think Ice Cube knows who the puppeteers are. He understands that there are puppeteers, and he can tell from his own experience both.
Literally the same people who own the labels own private prisons.
Ice Cube just named Snoop Dogg and Diddy as the muscle behind Hollywood's shadow government, and the evidence is piling up faster than the industry can bury it. It started quietly in July 2023 when Cube sat down on The Breakfast Club and told Charlamagne and DJ Envy, "They're all around. They put guardrails around you, and if you step out of line, they put up a gate." He didn't hesitate when Charlamagne called it the Illuminati. Cube just said, "Probably so." That one word opened a door that the entertainment world has been trying to slam shut ever since. By the summer of 2024, he wasn't just speculating, he was naming names. On social media, at live events, and even during interviews with Joe Rogan, Cube accused the NBA and ESPN of trying to sabotage his BIG3 league. He said they were working behind the scenes to block sponsors and networks, all because he refused to join what he called the Club of Gatekeepers. It wasn't some symbolic protest. Cube claimed that the same powerful figures who blacklisted him after his contract with Black America in 2020 were still pulling strings to keep his league off major platforms. When he said, "They've been messing with me ever since," the tone wasn't bitter. It was a declaration of war.
I'm talking about the Club of Gatekeepers that we all gotta deal with.
We're talking about a man who built an empire from NWA to Friday. When he says shadow forces are real, people listen. And when he points to Snoop Dogg and Diddy as the enforcers, the industry starts sweating. Because if he's right, that means two of the most influential figures in modern entertainment have been working on both sides. Public icons by day, gatekeepers by night. Cube's been warning that this is how control works in Hollywood. You don't need to silence everyone, just keep the biggest voices loyal or compromised. That's where Diddy's story turns dark. In 2025, the verdict hit. The mogul, once known for celebratory toasts and red carpets, was convicted for transporting women across state lines for paid intimacy under the Federal Mann Act. Prosecutors described what they called freak-off events, lavish, substance-fueled gatherings filmed from multiple angles, where the women were allegedly coerced, then blackmailed with the footage. In court, witnesses testified that these tapes were sometimes used as leverage, insurance against betrayal. The government called it manipulation by power and fear. And now, Diddy's serving over 4 years in a Brooklyn facility described by his own lawyers as hell on earth. Sound familiar? Ice Cube's been describing this pattern for years. Control the artist, control the narrative, and if they step out of line, you've got the tapes. Insiders close to Diddy's old circle claim that his freak-offs weren't about pleasure. They were about control. One former associate told reporters that attendance alone created an unspoken chain. Who was in the room? Who was filmed? Who's still silent because of what those cameras caught? Those questions are still hanging in the air, and every day that Diddy sits behind bars, new whispers ripple through Hollywood's upper floors.
And as soon as I walked out of there, I went in the bathroom and I threw up. And just laid on the floor for like 30 minutes. His mama came in there and cleaned me up. His mama.
Inside that same circle sits Snoop Dogg, but his story takes a different shape. Back in 2002, he dropped Pimp Slapped, a diss track so venomous it stunned even veteran fans. He called Suge Knight a punk, accused him of trying to get me pop-popped, and dared him to a fight. That was the Snoop who had survived the most dangerous years of Death Row Records, the same Snoop who stood trial for a shooting charge and walked out free. But something changed. By 2018, Snoop was on camera calling Suge a real one. This wasn't a casual comment. It was the total opposite of everything he'd said before. So, what happened between the diss track and the détente? Forgiveness. Or a deal. Because the timing matters. Around the same years, Snoop was reconciling with Suge. He was also embedding deeper into the very entertainment infrastructure that Ice Cube now calls the club. He became a pitchman, a media personality, a host on major networks. In an industry built on silence, that kind of access doesn't come without loyalty. Some insiders say Snoop's image as the endlessly chill uncle of pop culture hides a more strategic role, a bridge between the rebels and the gatekeepers, a man who can calm a storm, or start one, depending on who's paying attention.
So we made the business decision to be cool with each other, because I don't hate him, and he don't hate me.
Then there's Suge Knight, still broadcasting from prison through his Collect Call podcast, where he recently implied that Snoop might have known more about Shakur's fate than anyone realized. Suge said flatly that there were things to explain. That line hit the internet like a thunderbolt because it stitched two timelines together, the 90s gangland chaos of Death Row Records and the modern narrative of media control that Ice Cube's been railing against. If Snoop really is part of a decades-long balancing act between power and exposure, then his peace with Suge might not be reconciliation at all. It might be survival. Meanwhile, the Diddy saga keeps feeding the same theory. Prosecutors in New York painted him as a man who turned influence into currency, building loyalty through fear. Witnesses described how private recordings became blackmail, how reputations were traded like stock, how silence had a price. And as Cube warned, once you owe the gatekeepers, you never stop paying. It's a system built on favors, footage, and fear, an economy of compromise. And when one domino falls, the rest start shaking. We can't ignore the timing. Diddy's conviction in mid-2025 lands right as Ice Cube's F the Gatekeepers tour hits its stride. On shows from Joe Rogan to independent podcasts, Cube keeps repeating one message. The same people who control the music control the movies, the sports, even the media coverage that shapes public opinion. When he says they're all around, he's not talking about a metaphor. He's describing a network that crosses every industry line. He says he's seen artists offered fame in exchange for silence and punished when they refuse.
I have to say, I'd never heard of this movie, and I have little kids. It was called Lightyear from 2022. I have absolutely no problem with the content. Like, he had a problem with the content in that movie. I have no problem at all. I thought that was presented as a brief history part of this movie. It wasn't a big part of the movie, and couples exist, and gay marriage is legal, and I found it all completely unproblematic. That said...
And yet, the more Cube speaks, the quieter his peers get. Snoop hasn't addressed the claims directly. Jay-Z, Beyonce, even Dre. None of them are talking. But the internet is. Rumors swirl about old footage, sealed NDAs, and a long-standing protection chain that keeps certain stars untouchable. Some of that might be online speculation, but when so many careers seem to rise and fall in sync with unseen approval, people start connecting dots. And every time a new scandal breaks, another artist exposed, another mogul arrested, it gets harder to dismiss Cube's warnings as paranoia. As of late 2025, Cube still insists he's not afraid. They can't cancel the truth, he said during a podcast appearance in September. The tone wasn't defiant. It was weary, like a man who's realized the price of saying too much. Behind him, the Big3 keeps running games, growing fans, and fighting for coverage the networks refuse to give. In front of him, the entire industry seems to be holding its breath, waiting to see if he'll name another name. Because here's the question nobody dares ask out loud. If Snoop and Diddy are the muscle, who's moving them?
Okay, so if
Of course, they're not actually running the labels.
they have
those
they have
things.
financial interest in
They
it.
have financial interest.
While Ice Cube was promising to expose the gatekeepers, Diddy was in a federal courtroom hearing the judge call his crimes disgusting, shameful, and sick. And the details that came out next would make Cube's warnings look tame. The 2025 trial unfolded like something out of a dark thriller. Cassie Ventura, Diddy's ex-partner, testified that she had been controlled for nearly a decade. She told the jury about the so-called freak-offs, elaborate performances where she said she was coerced into participating while Diddy watched, filmed, and later threatened to release the footage if she spoke out. Prosecutors went even further. They didn't just call this abuse, they called it a criminal enterprise. And if Diddy was running an enterprise, the question that echoed across the courtroom was the same one Cube has been asking for years. Who else was involved?
Did they
Work with
manipulate?
artists?
Did they manipulate you?
No, I'm
Never.
an independent artist. Always have been.
As testimony poured in, the image of Diddy as a charming mogul collapsed into something far more chilling. Witnesses described manipulation, intimidation, and a culture of silence so deep that even top executives were afraid to cross him. There were reports of recordings stored in private safes, encrypted drives, and secret rooms in his mansions. The prosecution described a system built not just on excess, but on control, one that rewarded loyalty and destroyed anyone who tried to leave. It was no longer about one man's private life. It was about an entire structure designed to keep power concentrated in the hands of a few untouchable figures. When the verdict came down, guilty on 2 counts of transportation for immoral purposes, Diddy didn't flinch. He was sentenced to just over 4 years and fined $500,000, a fraction of his empire, but the symbolism ran deeper. That charge came from the Mann Act, a century-old law first used to target interracial couples in the early 1900s. And here it was, in 2025, being used against a black mogul whose reach extended into every corner of music and fashion. Coincidence? Or was someone sending a message that even the most powerful can be pulled back into line when they forget who's really in charge? Meanwhile, Snoop Dogg's silence was starting to sound louder than any diss track. No interviews, no social media comments, nothing about Diddy's conviction. For a man who built his reputation on speaking his mind, the quiet was deafening. Insiders whispered that Snoop had been warned to stay clear of the topic, that mentioning Diddy's name in any context could reopen doors best left shut. Others say he doesn't need to be told. He knows how the system works. He's seen what happens when people talk too much. And that silence, in a way, says everything. We can't overlook how strange his reconciliation with Suge Knight looked in hindsight. Back in the early 2000s, Snoop publicly accused Suge of trying to have him popped. He rapped about it, mocked it, turned it into an anthem of defiance. Yet by 2018, he was sitting down with Suge face to face, calling him a real one and forgiving everything. The same Suge who once terrorized half the music industry was suddenly an old friend again. Does that sound like simple forgiveness, or does it sound like a deal struck under pressure? A way to keep the peace in a game where peace is bought, not earned.
You're gonna establish yourself as a businessman. that I wasn't taught on death row records. All my cars was in Suge Knight name.
Wow.
When we look at Diddy's case through that lens, the pattern starts to emerge. In 2024, federal agents raided his LA and Miami mansions. What they found went far beyond luxury. Reports described shelves lined with hundreds of recording devices, more than 1,000 bottles of what investigators called freak-off supplies, and entire rooms wired for filming. Authorities also seized substances, footage, and electronics that prosecutors later said contained material leverage. It wasn't just a party, it was a business model, influenced by intimidation, exposure as insurance. And if Diddy was operating with that level of organization, it's impossible to believe he did it alone. Someone had to be protecting him, funding him, or at least turning a blind eye. What if the real power of these parties wasn't the intimacy? It was the recordings. The 2024 raids revealed more than opulence. They exposed a psychological system designed to capture, catalog, and control. Cassie Ventura's testimony described how cameras were hidden in corners, behind mirrors, even in lighting fixtures. She said the filming wasn't about pleasure. It was about evidence. Once you're on tape, you can't talk. Once you've seen who else is on those recordings, you definitely can't talk. That's how the trap works. It turns participants into collaborators, victims into witnesses, and witnesses into hostages. It's a currency far more powerful than money.
When you get to be the age that we at and you get to become as successful as we are, you have to start doing some things that matter for the future.
During the trial, prosecutors called it material leverage, but those two words hardly capture what it means to live under the threat of exposure. Investigators confirmed that among the seized items were encrypted drives labeled only with initials, never names, and that some drives were locked so tightly, federal technicians still haven't cracked them. Several women testified that they were told these recordings were for protection, but what protection looks like in this world is obedience. The fear of humiliation becomes the leash, and everyone who's seen the footage becomes part of the silent network keeping the gates closed. And then there's Snoop. He's been in the game since death row, long enough to understand that every move has a camera behind it. So when he says nothing about Diddy's conviction, when he doesn't even flinch, it doesn't look like distance. It looks like awareness, maybe fear, maybe complicity. Because the tapes don't just control the women, they control the men who know about them. And that's how you keep an industry in line.
Better myself every day and try to grow to be a better musician, a better person, and just be, more in control of the power that I have.
Even after his conviction, the machinery around him hasn't collapsed. It's just gone quiet. His label still runs, his catalog still streams, and his former partners are curiously untouched. Some fans have pointed out that major figures who once shared stages with Diddy, Jay-Z, Beyonce, Snoop, have all remained conspicuously silent. Not one of them has offered a public statement of support or condemnation. It's as if they've been instructed to stay still until the storm passes. And maybe that's exactly what's happening, a controlled silence until the next scapegoat appears. Ice Cube, on the other hand, refuses to stay quiet. Every appearance on his F the Gatekeepers tour adds another spark. He talks about the invisible hands that control not just artists, but the flow of information itself. How stories get buried, how scandals vanish overnight, how blacklists are written in invisible ink. He insists this isn't paranoia, it's pattern recognition. They've got people everywhere, he said on a recent podcast, his voice low but steady. Networks, studios, executives, even the people who write the news. If you don't play along, they erase you. Whether we believe him or not almost doesn't matter, because what's unfolding around him feels like proof in real time. What's most unsettling is how the same players keep showing up. The names change, the scandals evolve, but the rhythm never does. Someone rises fast, breaks ranks, and suddenly finds themselves buried in controversy. Someone else stays obedient, and their career glides forward untouched. Cube says that's not coincidence, that's management. The kind of control you can't see but always feel. The kind that keeps everyone smiling for cameras while the real decisions happen behind closed doors. And in that sense, Diddy's downfall might not be a story of justice at all. It might be an internal purge, one powerful piece sacrificed to protect the rest of the board.
People at the top can manipulate what's going on with the people who are bickering and fighting.
Then again, the evidence is messy. Diddy's legal team insists he's a changed man, that he's paying his dues and will rebuild when he's out. His family publicly wept in court, begging the judge for mercy. The judge called his actions subjugation. Cube calls them symptoms. Either way, the truth feels bigger than any single man. When the system eats one of its own, it's usually not because he broke the rules. It's because he broke rank. And while the world debates whether Diddy was a victim or villain, Snoop is out there playing ambassador again, smiling on talk shows, hosting big events, and steering clear of controversy. He's bought Death Row Records, the same empire that once nearly destroyed him. It's poetic, or maybe it's strategic. Shug's behind bars, Diddy's behind bars, and Snoop's the last man standing. If this really is the shadow government Cube's talking about, then we might be watching its new spokesman in real time. We keep coming back to one question. Why now? Why expose Diddy after decades of rumors? Why punish him with an antique morality law while others walk free? And why is Cube, after 40 years of loyalty to the business, suddenly treated like a threat instead of a legend? Maybe the answer lies in the same place as the silence, somewhere between fear and control, where everyone knows too much but says too little.
Snoop Dogg saying he owns Death Row is no different than me saying Tupac was alive because I had the unreleased Tupac music. It ain't no different, bro.
Because, as of tonight, Diddy's locked away, Snoop's smiling through the tension, and Ice Cube's still shouting into the void, daring the gatekeepers to come for him. And the industry. It's already moving on, pretending nothing happened. But we've seen enough to know the game's still being played. And if Snoop and Diddy are just pawns, then somewhere out there, the real kingmakers are still calling moves we can't see. So the only question left is, when the next scandal hits, will we recognize the players behind it? Or will we still be fooled by the show? Thanks for watching. Stay sharp and keep your eyes open, because the story's not over yet.